What happens when one of the biggest names in hip-hop, a man who built empires and reshaped music culture, ends up behind bars, running a business class for convicted felons? Sean Diddy Combs, business mogul, multi-platinum artist, and the face behind Bad Boy Records, isn't just serving time, he's teaching, not from a studio or boardroom, but from inside one of America's toughest federal detention centers. At the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, far from red carpets and flashing cameras, inmates weren't lining up for autographs. They were lining up for notebooks, because Diddy started something almost no one expected, a prison program called Free Game. And now, one of the men who sat in that very class is finally speaking out. He's revealing what Diddy was like without the filters, the entourage, or the image. From daily homework to intense personal confessions, this wasn't just a publicity stunt, it was personal. According to this former student, Diddy wasn't hiding from who he was. He was rebuilding what he lost, piece by piece. But here's the thing. This class didn't just change students. It changed the entire unit. Violence dropped. Rival groups started working together. Even the guards were stunned. Why? Because whether you love or hate Diddy, when he spoke, they listened. And yet, the most shocking part wasn't what he taught about money or success. It was why he said he was there in the first place, and what he claimed the universe was trying to teach him behind those bars. This is the story of a prison course that should have never existed, taught by a man who could have lost everything but decided to give something back first. Stick around because what happens next is something no one saw coming. For decades, Sean Diddy Combs stood at the pinnacle of power, not just in music, but across fashion, liquor, media, and pop culture. He wasn't just successful, he was untouchable. The kind of figure who made headlines just by showing up, who turned artists into icons, clubs into kingdoms, and himself into a global brand. But in the fall of 2024, that empire cracked fast. It started with a late-night federal raid that sent shockwaves through the industry. Diddy was arrested in September 2024 in connection to a sweeping federal investigation into sex trafficking, coercion, and years of alleged criminal abuse. The accusations were explosive, and for a man who once controlled the narrative, this time, he couldn't spin it. The headlines didn't hold back. Diddy arrested in FBI trafficking sting, Grammy mogul accused of cross-state exploitation. For weeks, every tabloid and news blog dissected his history, his personal life, his business dealings, anything that suggested a pattern, a motive, or a fall from grace. In May 2025, his trial began, and if anyone expected it to be clean or straightforward, they were wrong. It was messy, chaotic, and public. Testimonies from former associates, leaked recordings, and courtroom outbursts fed the media frenzy. Diddy's defense team painted him as a misunderstood entrepreneur and cultural scapegoat. Prosecutors argued otherwise. By July 2025, the gavel dropped. The verdict? A mixed bag with lasting damage. Diddy was convicted on 2 counts of interstate transportation with the intent to promote prostitution. However, he was acquitted of the more severe charges: federal sex trafficking and racketeering. Still, the reputation hit was brutal. The iconic mogul, once a symbol of calculated control, had officially lost it. In October, Judge Arun Subramanian handed down a 50-month prison sentence, just over 4 years. And with that, Sean Combs was processed and transferred into Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center, one of the grittiest federal facilities in the country. Behind those massive gray walls, there were no VIP privileges or superstar status. According to insiders, Diddy spent his first few weeks in isolation for his own protection. Whispers spread through the block. Some said he looked paranoid, others said humbled. Guards reported tension rising anytime he entered common areas. There were even rumors of threats and a near-violent altercation during his early days, none of which appeared in formal reports but still shaped the atmosphere around him. For someone once worshipped in award shows and executive boardrooms, the reality of MDC Brooklyn was a brutal recalibration. Cold meals, limited yard time, skeptical inmates. No more entourage, no more filters, just concrete, time, and reflection. And that's where the story shifts. Because before anyone could count him out, rumors started swirling of something strange, something unexpected that Diddy was doing inside. He wasn't laying low, he was teaching. And that's when the idea for Free Game was born. At first, Diddy kept his head down. Inside the walls of MDC Brooklyn, silence was often the better move, especially for someone with his kind of spotlight. Most expected him to do the least, serve the time, and disappear quietly. But that's not what happened. Within weeks, something shifted. Inmates tell it like this. At first he barely spoke. No eye contact, no flexing. But slowly he started asking questions, not about his own case, but about theirs. About their stories, backgrounds, and what they planned to do once they got out. And when it became clear, most of them didn't have an answer. That's when the idea sparked. What started as quiet conversations on the rec yard or in the day room turned into something bigger. Diddy didn't just want to kill time, he wanted to build. And so, from the middle of a federal lockup, surrounded by men doing 5 to 10, 15, life, came something no one saw coming, an entrepreneurship program called Free Game with Diddy. This wasn't some casual TED Talk behind bars. It had rules, structure, expectations. Diddy made it clear from day one. This wasn't about hype. He wasn't looking for attention. He was looking for commitment. Participants had to read 1 hour a day, non-negotiable. They had to take notes, write reflections, talk about their goals. And when they submitted those notes, Diddy actually read them and gave personal feedback line by line. He'd circle soft spots in their logic, highlight areas that lacked discipline, link their plans back to values from his own playbook. This wasn't lecture-based. It was real talk. A one-of-a-kind mix of street wisdom, corporate hustle, and something deeper, introspection. Lessons were built around 3 brutal ingredients most inmates weren't used to looking at: discipline, sacrifice, and structure. He made them think long-term about ownership over labor, branding over hustling, and how to scale ideas, even when the world says you shouldn't have one. To outsiders, it might sound like a branding stunt, some late-stage image repair cooked up by a crisis PR team, but inmates didn't feel that. According to them, Free Game never felt like a performance. It felt intentional. Because this was the same Diddy who once threw champagne at clubs or held court at the Met Gala. This was a man who debuilt billion-dollar brands and lost control of his name, now standing in a federal prison classroom, telling other men how to avoid becoming him. He didn't present himself as the teacher who had all the answers. He presented himself as a lesson, and soon that vulnerability made others open up, too. But while the class was just starting to catch fire, the real spotlight came when one student, someone with nothing to prove and nothing to gain, finally spoke out. And what he had to say surprised everyone. Most stories about prison focus on the fall, the mugshots, the court cases, the broken careers, but sometimes, the most powerful moments come from what happens after the dust settles. That's where Raymond Castillo comes in. Castillo wasn't looking for attention. He hadn't written a book or called the press. He was just another face in the system, another inmate at MDC Brooklyn, doing time, hoping to survive it. But when Diddy started his Free Game program, everything changed for him. He signed up, not because he idolized Diddy, but because there wasn't much else to lose. He didn't care about flashy success stories or Instagram motivation, but what he got was something way more real. I had no direction before I walked in that room. Castillo later told Us Weekly. That class gave me something I hadn't had in a long time. Structure twice a week. He sat just feet away from a man whose records once soundtracked his teenage years, now talking about credit, sacrifice, focus, and mistakes. And not just business mistakes, but human ones. Diddy didn't talk like a guest speaker. He talked like someone still figuring it out, right alongside them. But Castillo says the class went deeper than just personal development. It reshaped the entire vibe of the unit. MDC was divided before that, he said. We had racial tension, groups not mixing. That class, it brought us together in ways nothing else ever had. According to Castillo, inmates from all walks of life, Bloods, Crips, Latin Kings, independent hustlers, even guys who barely spoke English started showing up, sitting down, taking part. Word spread fast. A few counselors dropped in, then an assistant warden. Some of the same people who had written these men off started watching them engage. The unity was real. People were smiling, talking, learning. You don't get that in here, Castillo said. It was like for a couple hours. We remembered we were more than just inmates, and it wasn't just lip service. When Castillo was released from prison shortly after attending Diddy's course, the lessons stuck. He didn't claim to have it all figured out, but for the first time, he had a plan. He knew how to pace himself, how to build, how to look past the quick win and think about long gain. And the effects weren't just limited to that room. According to him, that course was a blueprint not just for business but for healing. Now, he doesn't sugarcoat Diddy's past. He made mistakes, Castillo said plainly. He's paying for what he did, but what he gave us was real, genuine. In a world quick to cancel and condemn, Castillo's reflection is nuanced, and maybe that's why it resonates. Because it wasn't about defending a celebrity. It was about recognizing change, even in the unlikeliest place. And as we'll see next, this wasn't just a deep talk class behind bars. It was work. Real structure, real pressure, real homework. And Diddy, he didn't go easy on anyone. This wasn't free time. Diddy's prison class, Free Game, wasn't some laid-back TED Talk with jokes and motivational quotes. According to the men who took it, it was more like boot camp for the mind. Strict, demanding, intense, and for many of them, completely unfamiliar territory. There were no bystanders. No one sat in the back chilling or zoning out. If you were in the room, you participated, period. The very first rule, take notes. Every single day. Each meeting came with a reading requirement, 1 hour minimum, and Diddy didn't just assign books like random self-help bestsellers. He curated stuff he lived through. Autobiographies, business breakdowns, marketing psychology, branding manuals. He treated those books like fuel, and if you weren't feeding your brain, you were wasting everybody's time. One former attendee said, he'd check your notes. If they were trash or copied from someone else, he'd call you out in front of everyone. And it wasn't about shaming, it was about standards. Each night, participants had to complete written homework, reflections, plans, or strategy exercises. Didn't matter if there was chaos on the unit. Didn't matter if someone got into a fight to bunks down. If you were in free game, Diddy expected you to show up with your head in it. And here's where it gets even more real. He didn't just preach, he participated. He'd walk around during class, reviewing pages, reading journal entries, circling things with a pen, and saying, "Nah, this ain't it. Go deeper." Then later, during open floor sessions, he'd open up about his own lessons, not in a preachy know-it-all way, but with brutal honesty. He shared failures from the bad boy rise, deals that fell through, artists he let go too soon, internal power struggles. One inmate said Diddy once used an old investment misstep as the base for an entire classroom debate on scalability versus identity. And yeah, that's prison talk, about business infrastructure. He drilled them on self-branding, reminding everyone that reputation was currency. Even in a place like MDC, Diddy told them, "You're building your brand, whether you know it or not. Every move counts." And the thing is, they listened. Because this wasn't some celebrity playing professor. This was a once-in-a-generation mogul who'd built liquor empires, TV networks, record labels, showing them how he did it, step by step, and why it nearly destroyed him. The result: respect. Not because of who he used to be, but because of how present he was. Even guards noticed the difference. One reportedly said, "I've seen classes come and go. This one, they actually care." And that was the key. This wasn't about checking a box or earning good behavior points. It was about learning how to think like a boss, in a place designed to make you feel small. But it turns out, the most powerful lesson Diddy gave them had nothing to do with money. It was about why he believed he was in prison in the first place. For most inmates, prison strips purpose away. But for Diddy, it flipped something on. Too many, the free game program looked like a way to pass time, or maybe win some goodwill. But according to Raymond Castillo, and several others who were on the inside that couldn't be further from the truth, they say Diddy wasn't just teaching that class, he was living it. People need help, he told them more than once. And I was put here for a reason, not for punishment, not to break, but to serve, in a way he never had before. That single sentence became something of a mantra, repeated by inmates even weeks after he said it, and not in a mocking way. In awe, "Man, he really believes in this." One of them told a counselor, "He's not in here acting, he's on a mission." According to Castillo, Diddy wasn't trying to outrun his past or hide from his name. If anything, this class became the one space where he could finally face it and reshape it. What started as structured business advice turned into something that cut far deeper, pulling in questions like, what's your purpose without a name? What's your legacy without fame? What happens when the thing you were known for is no longer yours? He said he found his passion again, Castillo recalled. Not for money, not for clothes or clubs or fame, but for people, for helping dudes who never had a shot. That purpose brought something back to Diddy that had been missing for a long time. Discipline. Not the kind that wins awards or closes deals, but the kind that keeps you grounded when there's no audience watching. He showed up consistently, led discussions, read homework even when he looked drained and broken down. Castillo mentioned moments where Diddy would pause mid-sentence, clearly battling stress, emotion, or fatigue, but still pushed through. Some nights, he stayed later than anyone else. Other times, he'd admit to the class that he was struggling to forgive himself, not just for what put him behind bars, but for the people he couldn't go back and fix things with. And that's when this stopped being a celebrity moment and started becoming something rare, reverse mentorship. Because yeah, he was the teacher. Yeah, he walked in with the most power. But step by step, it became clear. Diddy was healing just as much as the men around him. They weren't just learning from him. He was learning from them too. The silence of a cell, the walls that close in, the space away from the noise, it gave him something he hadn't had in 2 decades, clarity. And through that, he said he rediscovered what he called love misunderstood, a love rooted in responsibility, not flash. This wasn't about a comeback, it was about accountability. And soon, that vulnerability set the stage for Diddy's boldest move in the class, opening up not just as a businessman or mentor, but as a cautionary tale. Because the next phase of free game got personal. Very personal. By now, the inmates in free game weren't just expecting business tips. They were taking notes on life. But no one saw it coming when Diddy stopped talking about branding and deals, and started talking about pain. At a certain point, the class went from structured lectures to something more like confessions. Castillo said it happened mid-discussion. Diddy was explaining how to pivot a failing project when he suddenly paused, looked around the room, and said, "Y'all want to know what failure actually feels like?" What followed wasn't a textbook lesson. It was a series of stories, cold, honest, and sometimes hard to hear, about what happened when the lights faded and the empire started to crumble. He talked about nearly losing bad boy records after overextending business lines. Not just a risky music deal or two, but full-on near bankruptcy, masked by image and ego. He talked about trusting the wrong people who smiled in meetings and robbed him behind the scenes. people he made millionaires, who vanished when scandal hit. And then came the harder part. He opened up about mental health. There were moments even at his peak where he couldn't sleep, couldn't think, couldn't feel grounded, that the parties, celebrity friends, even awards, meant nothing. He'd step off stage and spiral for hours, pacing luxury suites like a prisoner in a gold box. The success looked legendary, but behind it, loneliness, pressure, and a growing dependency on anything that numbed it. According to inmates who sat in that session, Diddy didn't sugarcoat it. He talked about substance issues, emotional burnout, and the paranoia of being idolized one day and hunted the next. And in those moments, the classroom went silent. Even the guards posted at the back stopped scrolling their phones, because this wasn't about money anymore, it was about warning. One thing stuck with nearly everyone who heard it: the industry never saves you. Build something they can't take from you. Because if all you are is what they love today, then you got nothing when that love turns on you. He urged them to chase independence, not validation. Told them not to define their worth by applause, social media likes, or even loyalty, because none of it was permanent. More than once, he used himself as an example not of who to become, but what to avoid. Power, he said, turns blind if you aren't willing to check your own ego. An unchecked ego. That's the fastest way to lose everything you've built. For inmates used to fronting, flexing, and feeding off status, hearing that kind of vulnerability from someone like Diddy hit different. It dismantled the myth of making it, and it gave them something far more valuable than a business model perspective. By the end of that session, something had changed. Not just in Diddy, but in every man sitting across from him. As word spread through MDC, something even more unexpected started happening. Prisons, especially federal ones like MDC Brooklyn, aren't just about concrete and bars. They're about borders, unspoken lines drawn by race, by reputation, by gang affiliation. Most units hold their breath through every shift change, every mealtime, every stare too long across the yard. The motto, stay in your lane, or risk everything. That's what made free game so unbelievable. It brought people together in a space where division was the norm. We all sat in one room and listened to the same dude, and that never happened, Raymond Castillo said. Black, Latino, white, Asian, Bloods, Crips, Kings, nobody cared where you were from in that room. What started as curiosity around a famous face evolved into something stronger, respect. Not just for Diddy, but for each other. Inmates who normally wouldn't even make eye contact across a hallway started debating business strategy, sharing books, answering each other's questions. Rival sets that had once traded threats in the yard now passed notes, real ones between bunks. And the shift didn't go unnoticed. Counselors who'd sat through years of poorly attended rehab classes and angry therapy circles started pulling chairs into the back of free game. One assistant warden stayed for nearly an hour one afternoon, just listening, watching hardened men talk strategy, not survival. One correctional officer allegedly remarked, "This class, it's the closest thing to peace we've had in a long time." There were tangible results, too. Reports from inside sources suggested a drop in infractions, fewer fights, less tension during lockdowns, and while prison officials never gave an official statement tying this directly to free game, several staff members reportedly wrote private endorsements praising the atmosphere shift during Diddy's sessions. Even beyond the classroom walls, the transformation lingered. Prisoners began organizing impromptu reading circles. Some of them started journaling. Others, inspired by the idea of long-term moves, pulled back from reckless behavior and started making plans for trade school, a GED, a business idea based on something they learned inside. All of it sparked by one man, stripped of privilege and legacy, teaching behind bars, like it was the most important room he ever stood in. But the impact wasn't limited to the moment, because the real test of free game was what those men did when the program ended and what happened after the prison gates finally opened for them. It's one thing to inspire hope inside four walls. It's another to carry it past the gates, into a world that doesn't care who you studied under or how well you behaved inside. But that's exactly what some of Diddy's students began doing. Raymond Castillo, who once sat silently in the back of the free game room, is now moving with clarity. After his release, he didn't return to the streets like he'd always feared, broke, aimless, tempted by old cycles. According to recent interviews, he credits Diddy's program for shifting his mindset entirely. "I would have come out swinging the same way I always did," he admitted, "but now, I actually have a plan." Today, Castillo is pursuing a small business venture, rooted in skills he first built with a prison-issued pen and a blank notebook during free game. More than that, he has begun giving back, speaking to at-risk youth about hustle strategies that don't lead to a cell block. Mentorship, he says, is where the real money is. And he's not alone. Before Diddy's sentencing, several inmates penned handwritten letters to Judge Arun Subramanian, not begging for leniency, but sharing what they'd learned in those cramped classroom sessions. Some told stories of broken families, failed parole attempts, or lifetimes spent chasing fast money. But free game, they said, gave them a mirror and a map. One letter simply read, "It's the most meaningful thing I've ever done inside. Others shared how the assignments forced them to confront personal patterns, from toxic money habits to how they viewed their own worth. A few credited the program with helping them reconnect with estranged family members, using one of Diddy's lessons on leveraging trust over time as a guide in real-world conversations. Some inmates reportedly applied for vocational programs after the class, using their business plans from free game as the foundation for real re-entry strategies. And more than one was believed to have launched a social media presence from outside, low-key, focused on finance and self-discipline, shaped by ideas first shared in that prison classroom. This wasn't just some feel-good story left to fade once headlines shifted. This was impact in motion. No cameras, no press releases. Just real men, with real pasts, trying to build real futures from lessons taught by someone the world had already started to write off. But while former students tried to carry the momentum outside, many wondered something else. Would free game continue inside? Was Diddy still teaching? Or had his purpose burned out the moment he left MDC? For all the noise free game made at MDC Brooklyn, at FCI Fort Dix, it's been quiet. This federal facility in New Jersey is a different world. More space, less chaos, medium security, but still prison. And that's where Sean Diddy Combs now finds himself. Transferred here, after his October 2025 sentencing, Diddy slipped into a new rhythm. No high-profile classroom, no student testimonials, just laundry duty in the mornings, and, surprisingly, a job working in the chapel, the same post once held by reality star Todd Chrisley during his own stay in federal custody. He's also reportedly enrolled in the residential drug abuse program, a structured treatment track for inmates working on substance recovery and personal accountability. Sources close to the facility claim the decision was voluntary, hinting that Diddy might still be seeking some form of internal repair beyond everything else. But what he hasn't done so far is restart free game. There's no official class, no mentorship sessions, no inmate booths filling up with folders and notes, and that silence. It's confusing those who once believed this was his new purpose. To some it feels like the fire went out. One staffer reportedly told an insider, he keeps to himself, doesn't talk much, stays in his lane. Others say it looks more like fatigue. That maybe, after trying so hard to repurpose his fall at MDC, Diddy's just burned out, emotionally drained, spiritually exhausted. Or maybe, he's just biding his time, waiting for the right moment. Because around Fort Dix, rumors are swirling. A few inmates claim Diddy's been passing out motivational books again, whispering ideas about curriculum, writing in notebooks during chapel quiet hours. Some believe Free Game 2.0 is coming, quietly and on his own terms. But nothing concrete has surfaced, not yet. That uncertainty has created a split in how people now see him. Some say he's just trying to finish his time in peace, stay out of trouble, avoid headlines. After everything, who could blame him? Others, especially his former students, are still watching closely. Because if Diddy meant what he said, if the hustle really came from a place of purpose, then maybe free game was never about the setting. Maybe it's an idea that lives bigger than a classroom, one that could return when, or if Diddy decides to teach again. But whether this chapter becomes his legacy, or just a forgotten footnote, still hangs in the balance. So here we are, a Grammy-winning mogul, once celebrated for shaping soundtracks and selling out stadiums. Now remembered, at least by a few, as the man who turned a prison classroom into a launch pad for second chances. No cameras, no gold chains, just concrete walls, folding chairs, borrowed pencils, and a group of men who never expected to be taught by a legend, let alone build plans for life after prison inside his class. What began as a curiosity, Diddy's teaching in jail, evolved into something much deeper, a space of growth, of discipline, of honesty. He didn't just teach how to build a brand. He taught how to rebuild yourself after the world no longer clapped. And somehow, through that unlikely legacy, a divided unit found something rare: unity. Former rivals became classmates, shouting turned into strategy sessions. Lives weren't just interrupted, they were redirected. But here's the twist: the man behind it all was still navigating his own reckoning, facing guilt, consequences, and a world that may never fully forgive him. Yet inside those bleak walls, he chose not to hide from that, but to turn it into something useful. So maybe Sean Diddy Combs won't be remembered for the hits, or the parties, or the empire. Maybe he'll be remembered for one small room, in one broken system, where a few men learned how to leave differently than they arrived. Because sometimes, redemption doesn't come with applause. Sometimes, it happens quietly. Faded headlines, forgotten credits inside a prison classroom no one thought would matter. Was it redemption, reinvention, or maybe a glimpse at something rare, a man trying to matter in a way he never expected? That's the question we're left with. Do you believe people like Diddy can truly change? Or is this just another image shift waiting to fade? Let us know what you think in the comments below.